Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Understanding Medical Billing Metrics, What to Watch for Daily, Weekly, and Monthly. My name is Ashley Deitch, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing for MedEvolve. I have a few instructions before we get started. During the presentation, everyone will be on mute, just to prevent disruption, but we do encourage questions. You should see a control panel to the right of your screen, similar to the one shown here. If you don't see it, you can access it from the tab at the top of your screen. Please submit your questions there at any time and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Also, if you have any issues during the webinar, there's an option to raise your hand. If I see that it's raised, I'll do my best to help out. This webinar is being recorded and I will send a follow-up email to everyone who is registered with a link to access the video. Now I will hand it over to Matt to get started.
Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. It's always a new world here where we do everything virtually, so I get to stare at my own PowerPoint presentation and not see all of you. Hopefully today's gonna be informative. Just quick background on me. I've been in healthcare rev cycle, consulting, technology development services for over 20 years. I started my career out and have never left. Here at MedEvolve, I oversee all of our revenue cycle, billing operations, our workflow and analytics solutions, and then I do also oversee our business development and marketing. I sit on some healthcare boards, mainly technology companies, and then about 2 years ago, I founded a virtual community. It's an app for those suffering from physical and behavioral addiction. So it is a community there. So just as a recap, what we're going to look at today is really, key performance measures and the availability of those measures that you should be looking at on a consistent basis. Some will be daily, some would be weekly, and some would be monthly. We're also going to take a poke at financial forecasting. I think one thing COVID taught us here at MedEvolve is you better be able to plan for changes, even subtle changes in volume flow to your clinic. So things we don't have time for anymore. I always laugh when I see these because I spent most of my consulting career doing all of these things. Waiting for month-end reports to see how well the practice is performing. I can't tell you how many clinics I talk to where they're waiting 5 to sometimes 10 or more days into the next month to find out how the last month performed. It's not a way to live anymore in the 2021. Exporting data to spreadsheets, running endless pivot tables, spending days preparing analytics for board meetings, and constantly data mining, most likely in pivot tables in Excel, to determine what is going on with the revenue cycle, right? Root cause issues. Things you should know nowadays in real time. Net collection rate, what is still remaining from insurance and patient? How well are we collecting towards 96 to 97% of what we expect? And if we're not collecting that, why? And we're going to get into some detail around NCR here in this presentation. The liquidity of your AR, not just your AR balance, but what's actually owed to you and when you're projected to get it, right? COVID taught us that big time. Is not only do I want to know how much I have out there in cash sitting on my balance sheet in AR, but when am I going to get it, based on the payer? And if I'm not getting it in the right time, why? What can I start to look at? The status of your current AR. Again, you got AR reps that are working AR every day. You have to have the ability to not only see the status, but also to see the actions that they're taking. And we're going to spend some time on employee effectiveness here as well today. The effectiveness of your RCM partner. We're held accountable. Half our business is RCM outsourcing. So we have complete transparency for all of our RCM clients into our operations. We are contracted to do a good job, and if we're not doing a good job, we need to be held accountable. On the flip side of that, by the way, is that we also hold our clients accountable because we have transparency there, right? So we have a lot more non-emotional conversations with our clients than we did a couple of years ago because we have real-time data that's objective. Avoidable write-offs. If you're writing off something that's not a contractual, why? And what do we do to prevent them? What patients are financially cleared? I'll tell you, this day and age, this bullet point is critical. You have to understand when you're about to deliver service, did you do all the things that you're supposed to do to financially clear and de-risk yourself? It's a simple question, yes or no. And if not, then you at least understand the risk you're taking. And the last one is talking about the forecasting and really understanding not just forecasting net revenue, but starting to look at changes in payer and even procedure mix, as well as patient volume changes. So you'd be surprised, a lot of clinics that we work with, are still thinking that, well, my volumes were down, so my cash is down. Well, there's more to the story likely, right? Your volumes could be down, but depending on the procedures you're doing and the cash yield from the payer, you actually may be in a better situation than you were last month. So again, taking data science to a new level to run your revenue cycles. So, I put this cup of coffee on here. Actually, Ashley did. Thank you, Ashley. Every morning I wake up early here on the West Coast, and I take about 3 to 5 minutes to assess the entire revenue cycles of my clients, right? I know whether I have to ask questions to my revenue cycle leadership, or if I have to start asking questions to our clients, right? So just imagine a future where in a few minutes over a cup of coffee, you could do these things in real time. You know where the opportunity areas are. You spend your time on action planning and getting results rather than finding data. And many of the organizations that you all represent may already be doing these things, and that's awesome for you. For those that aren't, I'm hopeful today you'll get some tactics and some metrics that you can start to pull from your practice management systems in relative use. So metrics that we're going to look at each day. So this seems basic, I know, but I love it. I'm obsessed with what we entered yesterday. If you have Jamie Brown, my VP of Recycle on, she'd say, yeah, he is. What charges did I actually enter yesterday? What payments did I enter yesterday? How does that compare to what I expect to get on a daily basis, right? Keep in mind that if it's below what you expect, you start asking questions, right? Did I have staff out? Do we have more complex things going on with payment posting or with charge entry? Is there a backlog encoding, right? There's things that could be impacting your charge and payment posting that you need to be aware of, right? Some things you can solve, some you may not, but this is really, really important. Another area is understanding the backlog in coding, okay? So one of the things that I look at every day is if I start to see charges going down, or I'm looking at month-to-date charges for a particular client, I'm going to first go and look at the last charge that was entered and what that service date was, right? So we look at the service date, I'm looking at the surgical date, depending on your medical specialty, that may be relevant or not, and also procedure dates. If I see that, I've got revenue, my charge volume's down in March, and I'm looking at my KPI and I see that one of these clients last entered charge or coded chart was from a week and a half ago, I know where the problem is, right? And so, the same goes for ERA not processed. I also am obsessed with this one because if I'm looking at my payments month to date, I need to know how much is out there that's been received, just not posted to the practice management system. And if I show up in the morning and I have, say, $1 million in unprocessed ERAs, well, I'm happy that there's $1 million out there that hasn't been recorded yet. I'm not happy because my payment posting team is not being as efficient as they should be, or there might be something else going on, okay? Open charges and payments. Now, depending on your PM system, this may vary, but in our world, you can enter a charge or a payment into a control and not close it. So keep an eye on that, right? If you haven't closed the charge, it's not going out through the EDI software and to the payer. Same thing with payments, is you may be entering the payments into a control, but maybe you're waiting to verify funds are in the checking account before you actually post it, process it. So just again, when you're looking at day-to-day operations in a few minutes each morning, you want to look at these things to just know that at a macro level, your revenue cycle is where you expect it to be, okay? Data service charges. So actually, let me back up. Sorry, guys. Yeah, data service. So this is a metric that I look at too. A lot of times, a lot of these came out of COVID too, is I needed to understand, for example, February dates of service, what was the charges? So like in our world, we enter, say, 18 million in charges. Now in March, although I have more posting days, I've got 23 posting days versus I think it was 18 or 19, sadly, in February. I need to understand middle of the month, am I at least halfway to that 18 million, right? And if I'm not, I need to start going back to those prior slides and saying, do I have a coding backlog? Do I have a lot of charges that are sitting in open controls, right? If that looks about right, maybe I start looking at volumes. I start looking at volumes across our client base. So this is really, really important to keep an eye on, is how you're getting, those dates of services out. There's lots of things that could impact this, but at the end of the day, especially deductible season, we need to really understand what our impact to cash is going to be if our charge volumes drop. The other thing I'll just make note of is we have a lot of clients that are talking about surgical procedures being rescheduled because patients are actually waiting on their COVID vaccine. So they're saying, hey, I need to get my total hip or my knee or my whatever urology procedure done. As long as it's not urgent and it's more elective, I may wait till April or May when I'm vaccinated. So again, this stuff's really important now more than ever. So let's talk about, you enter the charge, but it doesn't go out the door, right? I call that billing whip. That was my old methodology of billing work in process. So when you look at edits, now again, depending on your PM and your EDI vendor, things may be different, but in our world at MedEvolve, we have what we call unprocessables, which is edits that are custom to the practice management system. And then we use our EDI clearinghouse that's now owned by Waystar, which is tracking the invalids as well as the rejected from payer. So really for us, there's three layers that could hold a claim up. But the key for this is to understand the why, right? And so you need to be able to see on any given morning how much is hung up in billing whip. So if I have $500,000 hung up in billing whip, that's a problem for us. I need to understand why is this. Now, if it's a credentialing issue and there's things that are out of control, we're waiting on credentialing, enrollment, et cetera, then that's understandable. If it's not that though, is there something that we could do on our end to get the claim out the door more efficiently? Is there something on the client's end that we need to work with? Do we need to build more bridge routines, build more automation to claim rules, right? Clean claim pass rate, 97 to 98% is what folks are looking at. One of the things that I want to introduce just the concept to is that, people get hung up on clean claim pass rate, but what we actually look at MedEvolve is looking at how many claims actually go out the door and paid without any intervention, right? That's a new metric that we started to look at because that gives me an idea of how much labor I need to support the revenue cycles. So if you're already doing that type of analysis, keep doing it. If you're not, consider it. It's one thing to get the claim out the door, but if you got to touch it 7 times with an AR representative to overturn a denial, and then you got all these other things going on, it's increasing your cost to collect. So this seems pretty basic, but you'd be surprised there's still a lot of clients that can't, or people I talk to that can't get at this information on a daily basis. I don't necessarily look at this information every day. Sometimes I do, so I don't want to lie to you all. But at least on a week, you need to be able to understand the charges that have gone out the door, the insurance and patient payments that have been posted, the contractual and other adjustments and visit volumes. Pretty basic stuff that you should just have a handle on when you're looking at how's my revenue cycle doing, especially this month compared to prior months. And do I need to make strategic changes or I need to run some audibles to have a better chance of having a really good month, right? One of the things I like to look at is the trending of average charge and payment per visit to really identify patterns. We look at this as kind of your office visit trends and then your other, which includes surgical. Really, it's trying to understand, and by the way, a lot of this comes down to the payer. A lot of this comes down to the procedure codes that are being billed out, right, in terms of how those fluctuations could occur. But keep an eye on that. If you start to see a negative trend, you want to go in and start drilling down into, okay, what is it? Is because we're doing less of this type of procedure that was a higher cash yield in the past, or are we doing more of this type of procedure that was a lower cash yield? Right, you got to start come up with some hypothesis and then have an ability to get to that information quickly. So clinic operations, making sure, this is important, and this is just kind of a visual, so kind of context to what I was just talking about, but being able to see in a nice layout, and you guys may be using data visualization technology tools. We happen to use Microsoft Power BI that sits on top of our PM system, but being able to have a nice layout to really see that information I'm talking about, looking at monthly averages down there, seeing how the current month is doing compared to the monthly average. Or the prior months, being able to quickly drill into things like a CPT code or CPT group or primary insurance or provider, right? All those things are really important when you start slicing and dicing your data. So one of the examples that I use is if I'm looking at, say, March and I see a huge drop in charges, at least it looks like it's not going to be as good as February or January, I'll go straight to the surgical CPT category and I'll say, okay, are my surgeries down? And then I'll start to go from there into why I'm why I should be nervous and what I could potentially do about it. A lot of data analysis, and I don't know the roles and responsibilities that are on this webinar here, it probably varies, but a lot of what I'm talking about today is supposed to give you peace of mind. It doesn't mean that you're gonna like what you see, but it means that you don't have to wonder, right? Wondering is a terrible thing in revenue cycle from my experience, 2 decades of it. I need to know if I'm in a good situation or a bad situation. And if I'm in a bad situation, I need to understand why quickly, not days or weeks, but minutes, right? Sometimes seconds. Why am I doing this? And then what can I do about it, okay? Over-the-counter collections, you know, I did a few podcasts over the last couple of weeks, and this topic just keeps coming up, and I keep explaining to physicians the importance of collecting what you're owed for the services you deliver, right? We are not going to stay in business or relevant if we don't collect from the consumer, right? One of the prime examples is the amount of money that I see coming through a clinic every single day, scheduled. So scheduled patients that already owe you money, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, for even an average size medical office could see that. So why do you keep seeing patients who already owe you money? Get a credit card on file, collect a heavy deposit, right? The other thing to this is estimating what you're about to owe, right? These estimators, we have an estimator, there's tons of estimators on the market. Many of you probably use an estimator. One thing to estimate, another thing to collect a good solid deposit against that estimate. All of these tactics are going to improve your OTC collections, but it's tiresome when I go on site to clinics and they say, oh, well, we try to collect the co-pays at the front desk. I'm like, whoa, that is like just one small part of the overall opportunity, you know. And then the same clients, you know, are saying, well, then I send it to an early out vendor who's going to charge 10%, and then I send it to a hard collection agency who's going to charge 30%. And you start realizing, I wrote off $1 million in bad debt. So I'm spending time on this slide for a reason, because if anyone out there is in the revenue cycle space, or if you're a provider in the space, you've got to start taking the self-pay liability very seriously. 20 years ago, it didn't matter if you collected, 5 cents on the dollar came from the consumer. Now it's with high deductible plans, it's probably 50 to 55% now or more. I mean, I have a $4,000 out of pocket, so, and I had to go to an urgent care last month, and I had some other things with one of my sons. So for me, if they're not shaking me down for that first $4,000, good luck. All right. The other thing to keep in mind is that people are nervous nowadays, right? They're nervous about their jobs. Are they going to be furloughed? Will they get another stimulus check? And so, and it's important to collect what you're owed before you see that patient, or at least get them on a good payment plan with credit card on file. If you offer credit financing, you can also look at that. So bottom line with OTC is you want to be able to track it. You want to see, you know, in the cases of down below, it's the third metric from the bottom, you know, how much are you collecting on average per office? You know, I'm not going to give you a baseline, but I can tell you the clinics that do it really, really well are a lot higher than the numbers on the screen. One other thing just on clinic operations is it's important to really look at your unique visits per month as well. And that's the third from the top there is understanding unique visits. And then we're going to talk about new patient visits as a percentage of total in here in a second. So let's look at new patient visit as a percentage of total. So, I tried to throw a benchmark out here, but it really depends on what you're looking at in your practice. You know, if you're a high growth specialty, lots of competition, then you may be looking at trying to do 15, 20% or more new patient, right? If you're established, you know, you're not in a competitive environment, you know, maybe it's less than that. But the bottom line is you do want to know what percentage of new patient business. I'm going to go a step further and say that not only do you want to understand what percentage, you need to understand your referral patterns. Who's referring these patients and what type of patient is it? I'm not going to sit here and say, don't accept a Medicaid or Medicare or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is understand the referral patterns and what that impact to your cash could be, okay? You may also have some marketing strategies out there where you start to look at your payer mix and your patient mix and say, hey, I seem to get better payers and better procedures out of this region, this zip code, whatever it is. So if I'm going to spend money on marketing, I'm going to do it in maybe those areas. Unreconciled appointments is another thing. I really dislike when this number is high. You know, if it's been more than 30 days from the visit and there's no charge on the visit, then you got to look at those. Now maybe the patient no-showed or they canceled same day and they weren't logged correctly in the PM system. If it's not that case though, you may have some missing visits out there and some missing charts that need to be looked at. So if you're not looking at this already, definitely on a weekly basis, you want to keep this in mind. So we already talked a little bit about clearinghouse, but again, making sure that you understand where your claims are in the process and have they left the building. And if they haven't left the building, you know why, okay? And that's really the most important thing to keep your AR days low, keep your cost to collect low, and obviously keep your cash flow maximized. And then trending, of course, is a theme here, right? Being able to trend month over month so that you can start to see, any improvements you made, whether that's actually making an impact or not. Account receivable, right? So we made it to the payer didn't reject it, they may deny it, which we're going to talk about here shortly. But what is my AR? In the sales process, we build ROIs. We don't even engage with the sales prospect unless they're willing to help us with some data to better understand the clinic, right? I don't like to just throw out a solution and hope that it works, right? I need to understand, is there value and is there a business fit? I would tell you that 90% of the time we ask for data, A, they can't get it, B, it takes weeks to get it. And C, when we do get it, it's in a format that's really hard to use. We can't afford that. If I say how many claims are on your open AR today, for example, insurance claims, and what's the balance of that, and what's the cash value of that, and how many are over 60 days, you need to be able to answer that question off the top of your head. You just have to. And if you can't, you've got to look at improving your reporting on that front. There's too much subtle changes that are happening in healthcare right now to lose money on the AR, right? Credit balance is the same thing, right? You got to understand your credit balances. You need to have what transparency into what payers are represented for patient and the insurance. And then the opportunity, right? You'll hear me say opportunity a few more times, but this is really important. And a lot of people mistake opportunity. They say, oh, so you're just saying what the allowable is. It's important to understand your allowable, but it's more important, in my opinion, and some may disagree, to understand reality. And the reality is based on your historical reimbursement for that payer, for that procedure that you're doing, right? So it's nice to say, hey, if I build this correctly and everything works out as planned, this is what I should get back. But you need to understand reality too. And then you start looking at those two together. But understanding the cash value on your receivable is really, really important. And also understanding the timing of when you should be paid is really, really important. And we're gonna close the session with some more insight around that. So when you're looking at AR, you're looking at AR trending. Again, you've got to be able to see metrics like this. How's my AR balance, debit balance trending? What's my cash value trending? What percentage of my AR debit insurance is over 60 days, right? If it's more than 15%, I have a problem with that. We try to shoot for less than 15%. What's my self-pay looking like, right? So you've got to be able to see these things, on a weekly basis, to go in there and just really watch how this is moving. So talk a little bit more about the insurance side. I hear a lot of metrics out there. I look at over 90. I happen to look at over 60 because in this day and age with AR days where they should be, over 60 days of insurance money is something that has to be addressed, right? You have to understand, why is that AR sitting out there unpaid? Is it denials? Is it poor follow-up? Is it promise to pays that haven't happened, right? There's lots of reasons. This is going to go into how you track the status and the actions that your AR reps take every day on this AR, right? You have to be able to get that data to be able to bump it up against what you're seeing in AR, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Keep in mind on the goal of 15 or less %, it does depend on medical specialty. If I've got a 30 doc neurosurgery group that does a lot of workers' comp, right? It has a lot in legal, arbitration, auto, et cetera, it's going to be a different measure for them than if I have, a primary care clinic that's, predominantly Medicare, or our derm clinic that's predominantly Medicare, or commercial managed care combination. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about what your goals should be. This third bullet, I just want to, it's not really a third bullet, the first checkbox there is, I just want to reiterate that make sure that you're measuring the percentage of claims that do go out the door and they get paid without any intervention. I've seen clinics as high as 90, 92, 93%, which is great. They're only having to work for 7 to 8% of that money. And then you want to start looking at that 7, 8%. Say, okay, what could I do to move them into the other bucket, right? Are there things that I could be doing differently on getting the claim out the door? Let's really analyze first pass denials and understand what's going on. Okay. Trending insurance, again, so in our world, we snapshot each month the complete history of the AR, so we can always go back to prior periods if we need to. Now, we do that because we do a lot of financial modeling for our clients, reserve models and things like that. But it's important to see how your AR is moving month over month, and not just total AR, but by bucket. And then it's important to be able to drill into it. So if I wanted to say click on Medicare versus workers' comp, I could do it quickly to see, am I seeing an uptick in the over 90, right? Am I seeing maybe I did a cash acceleration project targeted at Blue Cross for surgical cases in the 181 to 365 range. Did it work? Am I seeing a drop in that bucket? So again, you got to be able to measure it. Measure to improve was really the ethos of the first consulting company, Stockamp and Associates, that I started with back in the day. I've taken that to heart every single day since, right? If you can't measure it consistently, if it's not objective, you can't manage it, you can't get results off of it, okay? So trending is definitely important. Patient, again, not to belabor patient, I think I've already done that on a few slides ago. But look, it breaks my heart when I see, tons and tons of money sitting out there past 180 days, 365 days in self-pay AR, right? And people ask me, well, what do I do about it? I said, well, the first thing I'd stop doing is sending paper statements and hoping for a different result. I think there's a definition around insanity somewhere in that statement. Stop with that. Two, you've got to start looking at how you mobilely engage with your consumer. I always get the excuse of, well, my patients need paper. Do they? Because every other service that I use personally, I actually have to go log into a website to pull it, right? My bank statement, my healthcare EOB, and all that. So why in healthcare do we assume that we have to send paper right out of the gate? Send paper when you have to send paper. Start with mobile engagement. Start with mobile text and email with the link to pay your bill. If you don't have that, you need to get that functionality, right? A lot of our patients, of our clients, will get that link and they just pay the claim. They just pay it. It's great. If you can deliver a light statement, so give them enough on a visual so that they can actually see, okay, this is what was charged, this is what was allowed, this is what my insurance paid, this is remaining deductible, and this is what I owe. It helps for sure. But at the end of the day, use mobile engagement in your favor. The other thing is auto dialer. While it's becoming less effective because we all have caller ID and most of us don't answer any phone number that's not recognized, it still can be an effective tool. If you're making phone calls to patients, let me give you the 1010 rule, okay? We've been doing this for 3.5 years now using an auto dialer. And I will tell you with certainty that every call that goes out, only 8% of those patients actually pick up the phone. And of those 8%, less than 7% make a payment. So do the math on how many manual phone calls your business office would have to make to come close to what the auto dialer can do. Don't spend that time. I would rather you all spend your time with those people on calling your scheduled patients who already owe you money and collecting that money. At the same time, while they're on the phone with the patient, verify demographics. Verify that a pre-cert or an auth, is that going to be required? By the way, when verifying demographics this day and age, it's not acceptable to not get an email or a mobile phone. You have to get both of those. It's not just a physical address anymore. Make sure that the insurance is eligible. Make sure that the benefits for what they're about to do is eligible. So you can do some of these financial clearance activities by just calling your scheduled patients who owe you money. You can even throw in some, make sure to bring this, arrive 15 minutes early. Here's what to expect on your appointment. So you can make it even an additional customer service opportunity with your patient. Most patients will answer a phone call from a clinic. And if they don't, and you leave a message, it's about your upcoming appointment, they will call you back. Most of them. I can't say all of them, but most of them will. Projected liability, make sure you're using an estimator, whether it's homegrown. A lot of our clients have homegrown ones that they used, or you use one of the 1,000 that are out there in the market. Try to use one that's integrated with your PM if possible. It just makes life a little bit easier. think that's really it here. Denials, my favorite topic. Just kidding, sort of. So first pass denials are really important to track. And it has to go beyond the ANSI code, because if you had to look at all of the denial ANSI codes, and there's hundreds of them, and try to put a plan in place to what you're seeing, it's near impossible. So make sure that if you're using a denial management system, or your PM actually takes those ANSI codes and rolls them into classifications. I'm going to show you an example here on the next slide. You know, what are you being denied for? Is this a COB eligibility issue? Is this an authorization issue? Is this a coding issue, right? Is this patient responsibility denials, right? Which is really important the first part of the year. How much of my AR is being denied because the patient owes me that money? And then the question is, why didn't I get it prior to the service, right? So you need to understand it. The other thing that I hate is when I see denial systems that just pull the gross charge. It's, oh, you got denied, here's a gross charge. Pull the denied amount on the CPT code. Not every CPT is going to be denied all the time. So make sure that you're getting the denial date, you're getting that denial reason code, you're getting that denied amount, and that those denial reason codes, those ANSI codes, are rolled up to a classification. It's going to make your life so much easier when you can look at a trend like this and you can say, okay, what am I being denied for? So I could look at patient responsibility right there and say, man, look at February. $1.5 million got denied, almost $500,000 more than January. You know, and what's funny about February is there was a lot less visit volumes. It was less days, at least we saw that, right? Then you start looking at things like COB. You look at things like authorizations. You look at things like eligibility. You look at things like benefits max. Like, what is the front office doing? When you schedule and pre-register, are you not getting all of this stuff right? Right? And this is where it's really important to have work drivers that hold the front office staff accountable for the actions that they're doing to clear your patients before the service is rendered, okay? But trending first pass denials is really important. And again, you got to be able to slice this, right? You got to look, okay, what payers deny me? What's the ANSI code? Sometimes you got to look at the reason code. Is there a particular trend with a particular provider? If I want to look at medical necessity denials, is it all coming from 1 or 2 doctors of my 10? You know, if so, why? You know, so anyways, a lot to be said here on denials, but this is really, really important to be able to have the classification of those denial codes in something digestible. To try to go look at ANSI codes would not be fun. AR liquidity. This is another thing that I look at on a consistent basis. Is that, you know, I try to understand when AR changes, why did it change? Now, obviously, I would love it to be all due to payments, but that's not always the case, right? So when I ask in the sales process, you know, how does, or even our clients prior to using our analytics tools, you know, how did you look month over month changes in AR? You know, so for example, in this screenshot below is, you know, from February to March, you know, we went from 24 million to 26 million. Now in March, we've added 8 million in charges. We've collected 2.28 million in insurance payments, 779,000 in patient. We've contractualized 3.762 million. Other adjustments of 207. Now I'm going to look at that one. Then I'm going to go back to February and say, man, I had other adjustments of 700,000 and 500,000 the month before. What is adjusting on my AR that's not considered a contractual allowance? And then the next question is, what could be the reason for that, right? Are these avoidable write-offs? Are these bad debt write-offs? You know, denials, what are they? One thing I will just put out there is that when you look at your transaction codes in your PM, make sure they're mapped correctly. I find a lot of denials being mapped to contractual allowance. You can't do that. That's going to inflate your net collection rate. And that's not good. You know, you need to understand, and we're going to talk about NCR here next slide, is that you need to understand when your AR moves, how is it moving, why is it moving, and when you get to non-contractual allowances, could there have been money collected there? And if so, what processes do I need to look at in the revenue cycle to not make that mistake again? So on a monthly basis, and some of these, you know, net collection rate to me is something I do kind of keep an eye on it throughout the month, but you know, at the end of the day, it's not easy to get to NCR. We had to automate it on our end because trying to manually build this was just such a pain. But NCR is important, right? If you bill $1 and you expect 50 cents and you don't get that 50 cents, the question is why, right? Why is that? And so it's important to have a view that looks at the date of service, right? The month in which the service was rendered. So we'll just walk through an example here. If we look at December of 2020, there was $20.3 million in charges for services rendered in that month. As of last night, we've collected $7.8 million against that. So our GCRs are at 38.6%. That's your total payments divided by total charges. We contractualized $10.4 million. Our NCR is 79%, right? So then I look at other adjustments and I say, oh, man, 152,000 other adjustments. Then what I do is I start going into, okay, what was those adjustments? Could we have prevented that before? At the same time, to the far right, I need to understand what's still left out there by insurance and patients. So you can see bill, for us, that's patient liability. There's still 324 grand sitting out there. No bill, that's what we call insurance liability. I got 1.559 million sitting out there in no bill. So I still have a lot of work to do on my AR side of the equation, right? Which then gets into more questions about how your AR teams are performing. But this is really important to make sure that, if your NCR is below 90%, you've got to really look at it. And I would even argue this day and age, I mean, you're really looking at anything less than 94, 95%. Benchmark technically is 96. You have a 4% allowance for bad debt, charity, and avoidable write-offs, administrative write-offs. It varies on clinic though. I mean, we have some clinics that do a lot of charity care work, so they're never going to get to that percent. But again, know your NCR and know what's still left on the table to be collected. All right, AR days. AR day, obviously it's a measure, everybody uses it. One of the things we had to do with AR days because of COVID is we actually had to change our denominator up a bit. We had to look at a 90-day average daily gross revenue because the AR dropped so significantly in April and May that the AR days got really inflated. So when you're looking at your current debit AR divided by an average daily gross charge number, we actually do look at it at 90 days, 180, and 365. 365 is most conservative, removes seasonality. And then you have the 90 and 180 in there as well, just to see, if there's impacts from COVID or you had a couple doctors out, for an extended period of time, you can see that. People ask me, what's the goal? Look, I mean, if you're less than 30 days, you're in good standing. Depending on your payer mix, high Medicare, high commercial managed care, you might be in the low 20s. If you've got a ton of workers' comp, you've got a ton of auto, ton of legal, you're not going to be likely in the low 20s, right? So you got to know your payer mix and you got to have benchmarks there as well. So it's important to trend it more than anything because again, if you're trending it, you'll have the ability to see if you're going up, then you can quickly jump on that. And I look at this monthly is that if I start to see an uptick in days, I have to go back and start looking at some of the tactics that I could put in place to reduce that. And there's a lot of analysis that can be done quickly, on that front. All right, AR review. Last time the AR was worked, I ask this question all the time in the sales process. Do you know how many claims are outstanding? Do you know how many have been worked? Do you know how many that haven't been worked? For the ones that have been worked, how many haven't been touched in 30 plus days, 60 plus days, 90 plus days? You can't live in that world anymore. You're paying your AR teams a lot, good money to collect AR, and if they're not effective, you need to address that. Okay. And so you should know you should know this on a real-time basis, but at least really looking at these different measures to say, hey, what is out there? Now we look at it by payer, we look at it by denial category, we look at it by rep. So I know I can go and look at all my AR reps and see who's hanging up the most AR. This is also where we go to start looking at project work. If we start to see an uptick in Blue Cross Blue Shield, there's a lot of claims that haven't been touched in the last 30 days or touched at all, is we can design projects and then assign it to reps to really go after. But you need to know this information, and it's not easy to get to. We had to build a fully automated workflow management system, a cloud-based workflow management system, so that we could capture much better data from all of our revenue cycle FTEs, which then in turn gives us the ability to look at analytics like this. Just one like user view, is you need to be able to also set filters here, like real-time filters. You're going to want to be able to say, show me all the open claims greater than 60 days, for example, right? Show me only claims where there's been no insurance payment. Show me only claims that have had a denial posted. Show me only claims greater than $500, right? You know, that last one is really important. How often claims have been touched and there's been no outcome, right? No action, no outcome. If you think about it, you know, I call this exhausted claims. You know, I can go look at my AR and say, why do we keep touching this claim and it's not getting paid? Is it a quality issue with the representative? Is it a payer issue? And we escalate that to supervisors. So you should be able to know real time on your AR how many claims have been touched more than 5 times and there's been no insurance payment. You know, you need to have that information in real time, because that's where you can start to look at reducing your cost to collect and becoming more efficient. All the things I'm talking about today is about improving net revenue, right? Improving your cash yield, which is your NCR, reducing your AR, right? So accelerating cash that's on your existing AR, right? And then the front end side is it's the financial clearance piece. It's making sure you have data and metrics to prevent bad debt and prevent avoidable write-offs. So let's kind of wrap with forecasting and save some time for some questions if there are any. When I talk about forecasting, this actually came out of COVID. In April, early April, I had my data science team start to build a lot of views for me, so that I could, me and the CEO and our board, we could really look at this, our AR of our clients, and we could say, okay, what's out there? What's the value that's out there? And most importantly is, when is it going to get paid? And we have a lot of algorithms that go into these formulas, but it's important to understand that, you know, if it's not denied, what's the cash value? Far right is cash value. What am I going to get in the next 30 days, right? During the COVID era, it was like, what am I going to get in the next 14 days? You know, and then how much is going to be 30 to 44? Maybe it's a lot of workers' comp out there. How much is greater than 45 to 60? You know, and being able to see that. Also understanding how much of your AR value has already been denied for patient responsibility. Also understanding your AR value that's been that has a denial on it, right? That you're now having to go fight for. And this is where those denial classifications comes in. You should be able to see how much your AR today and the value of the AR is hung up, say, in a COB eligibility denial versus a no off versus a coding charge entry, et cetera. So forecasting is really important. There's a lot more I could say on forecasting. It's probably another webinar for us to do. But if you're not doing these things today, I highly recommend you do these, not just because of what happened with COVID and patient volumes, but just seasonality. Having these tools in place to plan resources, you know, is really, really helpful. So in summary, obviously, busy, right? We're doing with healthcare executives this day and age, are doing with a ton of stressors out there, dealing with personalities of doctors, dealing with changes in market share, dealing with competition, dealing with telemedicine, dealing with, you know, do I change my EMR? Do I stay on my EMR? Is my PN good enough? Right? All of these, and you got 1,000 vendors out there trying to sell point technology. So you guys are busy. For those administrators that are on this call or anyone in that red cycle, you're busy, okay? What you don't have time for is trying to get access to information to make informed business decisions about your practice. And that's what today's about, is what can I be looking at daily, weekly, monthly to give myself peace of mind. And as I said at the top of the hour, peace of mind doesn't necessarily mean you're happy all the time. It means you're in reality, you know, and if you're unhappy with the numbers, you know what to do about them, and you start to plan accordingly. And then you have ways to measure the effectiveness of that planning and what you implement. Data transparency nowadays across the revenue cycle is key. It amazes me how many clinics out there and hospitals are investing in really cool technology around patient engagement, no surprise billing, more ways to pay, online scheduling. And you know what they forget about is, oh, there's that thing about getting paid what I'm supposed to be paid on time for the services I'm delivering. All right, and we've had to elevate our game here at MedEvolve, because that's the problem we solve here, right? We solve to get you paid on time. And if you're not paid on time with the amount of money you expected, we can tell you why, right? That's where we've had to play. And so I highly encourage folks to really look at the technology you have in place today to run your revenue cycle, okay? That's really it. You know, again, there's the one, I guess one bullet I'll say is that we've had to spend a lot of time on, again, it's probably another webinar, is really looking at effectiveness scoring of each revenue cycle role and responsibility. So not just how productive my charge entry folks are, or my payment posters, or my AR teams, but how effective are they, right? If you're not effective, that's a problem. You know, if somebody's less productive but more effective, I might be okay with that, right? So this is a new theme that I want to stress anytime I have an opportunity to speak to a group like you guys, is effectiveness. Don't just look at production, You got to look at how effective they are. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and take a drink of water. I think, Ashley, I see your smiling face back on.
Yes, we have a few questions here. So, and if anybody else has any questions, feel free to enter them and we will do our best to get through them all. So the first one here is, do you recommend any specific changes in procedure or metrics when a practice is primarily out of network?
Yeah, we get a lot of, we don't have a ton of out of network clients because some of our neurosurgery groups are still out of network. You know, the thing with out of network is you really have to look at the NCR a little bit differently, right? Because these are not going to be just contractual allowances like it would be an in-network provider. So, you know, I think at the end of the day is understanding what part of your payer mix is out of network versus in network, and what is that potential impact to cash flow for you based on what you tend to collect on those procedures. But, you know, whether you're out of network or whether you're in network, the macro metrics that I walked through today are still relevant across the board. One thing I would say in the out of network is having a good, reasonable expectation of what patients are going to owe, and seeing what you can do on the front end to get as much of that at least secured as possible. I see a lot of aged AR sitting out there in out of network self-pay balances. Now, some of it was, you know, inflated, and you were never expected to collect 100% of that from a patient. But when you know what you expect to collect, make sure you do it on the front end if you can.
Okay, great. We have two similar questions. So how do we calculate the percentage of claims going out the door and paid without being touched?
Yeah, so you know, obviously the clean claim pass rate is pretty straightforward. You know, your EDI software should be able to tell you that part of it. So charge went out the door cleanly. Then what you do is you look at your AR work driver. So I don't know which PM system you're on. Like in our world, you know, our staff work 100% of the AR in a workflow system that tracks that they worked it, they had to touch it. So it's important that you can define touch from your AR teams when they're starting to work those claims. So if you can define touch there, you'll be able to measure that, hey, there was no touches by my AR team, and by the way, I got the payment in. You can go a step further and say, this was my allowable, and was that payment equal to my allowable, right? And if not, then obviously you're going to have someone have to go look at potential underpayments out there as well. But the key is being able to measure that your staff touched the claim on the AR. That's the key. You know, if you don't have that, you can't really get to that metric, at least easy, in my opinion. You'd have to do a lot of data mining to do that. So touches. The other thing I'll just say, since this is a great question, is the reason you want to measure touches is that you should be able to answer those questions. How much of my AR claims haven't been touched, or how many of those claims have been touched at least once, but they haven't been touched in 2 months? You know, or how many claims have been touched 5, 10, 15 times and there's been no insurance payment? So touches is important. Make sure you're tracking that, and it's captured in a structured way that you can report on.
All right. The next question is, if you're saying that NCR should exceed 90%, when should you reach that number for a specific month?
Great question. So hopefully, yeah, hopefully it goes above 90%, depending on your specialty. I lag at 90 days. So I go back 90 days. And so if I'm looking at NCR today, middle of March, I'm probably looking at November. You know, I'm giving December a little bit more time, obviously January a lot more time, February a lot more time, and of course the service revenue generated in March hasn't even processed yet from even Medicare. So I go back 90 days and see, you know, if your average going back 90 days is less than 90%, you want to take a look at that. Keep in mind the patient balance side of it, right? You got to keep in mind the patient balance, because a lot of people forget about that. They look at NCR from an insurance standpoint, but a lot of that high deductible money that's sitting on your AR is dragging down your NCR. So collect it up front. Don't schedule patients who haven't paid their bills.
All right. It is similar to the other question, but it could be different. So I'll just go ahead and ask it. Where do we see the percentage of claims that process as expected without a touch from an AR rep?
Where do we, so yeah, so similar to the last one is that's an algorithm, that's a formula that you'll want to put together that looks at the combination of your clean claim pass rate. So going out the door from PM to EDI, EDI to payer, not rejected. And then obviously no first pass denial, So there wasn't a denial on it, and it got paid, and it got paid. And if you want to go a step further and say, did it get paid to what I expected, that would be another step you could take. But at a minimum, how much of your charges are going out the door and at least getting a payment, right? That's a good measure to work how much labor is being put on your claims to get them paid. And like I said, I mean, I've seen that number as high as 92, 93%, but I've seen that number in the 70s too as well. So, and again, based on your specialty, I don't know a lot of high dollar neurosurgical cases that Blue Cross or Aetna or Cigna go, oh, hey, that's cool, I'll just pay. Oh no, I don't need additional documentation. I don't need anything. I'll just pay you $50,000. So depending on your medical specialty, you've got to keep that in mind. Insurance companies still game the system. They want to ask for information, and their hope there is that you don't have good AR follow-up measures in place, and you're not holding your staff accountable, and so you end up with a appeal filing statute write-off, which that's miserable when we see those come through.
Okay, I believe she's a current client, so this is another question. Do current Power BI customers have access to the data you reviewed today? Are these reports pre-built?
Yeah. So everything I reviewed today and more is in our Power BI, and we're starting to now roll that out to all of our revenue cycle clients, and then obviously we can roll those out to anyone who's on our practice management system. So all of this stuff is real-time KPIs is available in Power BI. And my data science team is constantly building out new views. What I tell my teams, and I would hope a lot of you are telling your analytics teams, is bring more answers to the surface. My goal with my team is by the end of this year, I don't want to have to go look at Power BI. I want to be told how I'm doing and what I need to do about it, right? And that's where we have to move now with artificial intelligence and machine learning and algorithms, is to start telling the story quickly and what you can do about it, so that you don't have to go in there and check boxes to data mine. We had to advance Power BI because I wasn't going to go run a bunch of month-end reports for all of our revenue cycle clients to figure out if there's a problem or not. Now I can assess a revenue cycle client in about 3 minutes or less. And so that's at least gotten us a much further along the pipeline of efficiency.
All right. What are the best front office efficiency KPIs?
Yeah, so a lot of this will come into your financial clearance processes. So first thing I look at on the first pass analysis is COB eligibility denials. Is that to me is a very straightforward process. It should not be difficult. I do recognize that some payers just don't want to be the primary payer, so they may try to game the system there a bit. But that's a good reflection of your pre-reg teams doing what they're supposed to be doing. If you're doing financial clearance, by the way, at the front desk day of appointment, that's not okay anymore. Actually, probably was never okay, but it's definitely not okay. You need to be doing financial clearance well in advance of that, because if something happens and you can't get that pre-cert, right, or you're not able to collect that deposit, or you're not able to verify insurance, you certainly don't want to see the patient. You also don't want to turn some away when they're already in the waiting room, okay? So these activities need to be done prior to service. So I would definitely look at your COB eligibility. I would definitely look at your no auth, no pre-cert denials. I would also look at your OTC collections. So how well are you at collecting money up front? I would also look at how many of your patients who are scheduled, who already owed you money, how much of that was collected. That's a metric we look at, right? So if you've got $100,000 coming through my building in the month of March, scheduled patients, did I collect 100,000 prior to the service, or did I collect 50, or did I collect nothing? So you want to hold your teams, and it just depends on how you do scheduling and pre-reg and reg in your organization. But those would be the three right off the gate that I would be looking at.
All right, great. We do have a couple more. So how do you get accurate numbers on the reports when the system can't distinguish or take into account surgical modifiers such as assistance or multiple procedure reductions?
Sounds like more of a fee schedule type question. Is it when you're looking at secondary assists and things like that? So again, if the data is available in a structured way, and you have an analytics solution that can grab at that, you can create any algorithm you want. And I think that's probably the thing to look at, is if you're having to do a lot of 100% write-offs for secondary surgery assists, that needs to be factored in. Also, when you look at your net collection rate, right? Because you know, you don't want to be dinged on NCR for something that was never going to generate any money. And that goes back to how you map those adjustment codes to categories that then calculate your NCR. But again, you know, in our world, every piece of data that's stored in a table, in a, you know, a field in a table, we can grab, and then we can start to build out views based on that data. Now, there are plenty of systems out there, I know, bolt-on systems that specialize in complex surgeries, surgical, especially spine, neuro, where they're doing multi-level reductions based on modifier and all that. So there's certainly systems out there that you could look to integrate to your existing PM as well.
All right, we have one last question and then we'll wrap up. What strategy would you recommend for experimental codes to be paid?
That's a tough last question. I probably would need a little bit more intel on what you mean by experimental codes. You know, I don't have a good answer for that question. You stopped me on that last one. So I would definitely, I don't know, you can write clarification in the chat box here, or we can follow up later. I just need to understand, you know, what you mean by experimental codes and getting paid. I understand what experimental codes are, but you know, if it's not in the contract, there's no allowable associated with it. You know, trying to understand what's reimbursed and what's not, you know, can be trickier.
All right, well, I think that's it, and we've come close to the hour here. So if you want to put up our contact information there.
Oh yeah, I could do that. That's us. Obviously, if there's more questions, follow up, feel free to reach out. You know, we're here to help. You know, most of my group spent years in the consulting side of the world, so they're pretty good subject matter experts and are happy to talk about process and people alignment. One last thing I'll say, since there's still a good group of you on here, is that when you install technology because somebody sold you on the vision or the value, you got to make sure that your people and your process are aligned with that technology. I can't tell you how many times I see healthcare providers buy the next cool thing from a vendor, and then they realize it's not effective because they don't have the right org chart in place or the right process aligned with that org chart with the tech. So just keep that in mind. You know, I know a lot of these point solutions are really cool to look at, you know, but if you're not willing to make the changes, or the vendor's not willing to help assist you on that, the changes that you need to make to maximize your effectiveness with that solution, then I would caution you. So thanks everyone for joining. It's a little hard talking to my screen. Normally I would have engaged more one-on-one with everybody, but I appreciate the webinars. We'll do more webinars, so please feel free to follow up. And if you have ideas, let us know.
Thank you.